196 of the budget speech, the Honourable Prime Minister mentioned that, and I quote, "We will also dispose of certain non-strategic assets to reduce the level of government debt." I know from the Honourable Prime Minister, what are these non-strategic assets that his government is planning to dispose of?
Well, we will decide in the course of what are the assets, but I can mention already, and it is known to everybody, that, for example, MOBEC, we want to put MOBEC on a very strong and good financial footing so that it is also attractive for the private sector, because eventually I don't believe that it is the, not that I don't believe, but I think that, I mean, this is this government's view, that we will obviously not be running a bank, but we will eventually dispose of that bank. So there is also the NIC. I mean, there are other institutions, there are other assets that we intend to sell, because it is basically, I believe, not for government to be running. The other one is the casinos. We all know that in the past, former government had already started a process to sell the casinos, but we will again, when we want to sell an asset, it must be worth, it must have value, so that government also gains in terms of revenue. That is why all these assets have to be put on a good footing, make it attractive for and interesting also for private sector to invest.
B 564.
Madam Speaker, as part of the base erosion and profit shifting project, there has been a new round of efforts to further combat tax avoidance and harmful tax practices. These efforts are being led by the OECD as mandated by the G20. As such, the OECD, through its Forum on Harmful Tax Practices, has been conducting the assessments of preferential tax regimes of more than 120 jurisdictions up to now, including Mauritius. On the other hand, the European Union, through its Code of Conduct Group on Business Taxation, has also embarked on a similar assessment exercise to fight tax avoidance and harmful tax practices as part of its initiative to establish a common list of non-cooperative tax jurisdictions. In that connection, 9 of our tax regimes have been assessed by both the OECD Forum on Harmful Tax Practices and the EU Code of Conduct Group. Subsequent to the assessments, those regimes, which were found to have potentially harmful features, were reformed with appropriate legislative amendments implemented through the Finance Act of 2018. These reforms included the following: 1. Abolition of the deemed foreign tax credit regime and introduction of a new partial exemption system. 2. Introduction of a separate tax regime for banks. 3. Abolition of the Category 2 global business regime. 4. Removal of the ring-fencing aspects identified in certain regimes. And 5. Clarification of the applicable rules on economic substance. Following these reforms and further reviews, the OECD Forum on Harmful Tax Practices is now satisfied that Mauritius no longer has harmful features in its tax regimes. On the other hand, the Code of Conduct Group of the EU, which has certain differences in terms of scope of coverage of its assessments and criteria used in the exercise holds the view that there were still some deficiencies in two of our tax regimes, namely the Freeport regime and the partial exemption system, which Mauritius ought to address. Madam Speaker, in line with our policy to be well regulated and cooperative with international institutions like the OECD and the EU, and given the reputational damage that a blacklisting could cause to our international financial center, government has, without hesitation, committed to address the deficiencies that have been identified by the EU in our regimes. To that effect, the technical working group that has been set up under the chairperson of the Deputy Solicitor General has worked out the required legislative amendments to address those deficiencies in consultation with relevant stakeholders. The proposed amendments have also been discussed and agreed with the EU. The next step in the process is for us to incorporate the amendments into our laws, which will be done through the 2019 Finance Bill. Madam Speaker, the changes that we are bringing to our tax regimes will not only address the deficiencies identified by the Code of Conduct Group of the EU, but will also consolidate our standing as a cooperative, well-regulated, transparent, and compliant jurisdiction. Government will continue to work in close collaboration with the OECD and the EU to ensure that Mauritius remains a jurisdiction of substance and complies at all times with international standards and best practices.
Honourable Uteem.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At page 19 of the budget speech 2019, the Honourable Prime Minister stated, and I quote, "We do not have any harmful feature in our tax regimes." So how can the Honourable Prime Minister reconcile this statement, given only a few weeks ago, to the letter dated 1st February 2019 from the Code of Conduct Group, referring to the partial exemption system, which stated, and I quote, "The overall assessment is that this regime is harmful"?
Well, Madam Speaker, when I said we do not have any harmful feature, it's to the effect that we are not on any blacklist so far with regard to the ranking that the EU has. But I have stated in my answer that there are two issues which have to be addressed. And we have been engaging fully with the EU on those two issues. And there have been representations that have been made by us when we have consulted the stakeholders here. And those discussions, I must say, have been fruitful. And Honourable Member will, I hope, by this afternoon, will receive the Finance Bill that will be debated before this House, and we are making and we are proposing certain amendments to our legislation in order to be fully compliant with the standards that have been set by the EU. So the work is being done, and it is our duty to see to it that Mauritius is compliant with the international standards. And I must say, when we discussed, maybe it's good for the House to know, because I have met personally Commissioner Moscovici initially when that issue of the listing was going to be carried out by the EU, and we were made to understand that OECD would be carrying on this exercise, and therefore we fully engaged with OECD. An honourable member will recall that we brought in a number of amendments that were taken on board by the Finance Bill of 2018. But I must say, and I say this honestly, at the last minute, then our attention were drawn that there were still two issues that were not to the satisfactory of the EU for the reasons that they have stated. And that was already too late for us then to come up with appropriate amendment to the legislation, and we were given time. We were given time till the end of this year to see to it that we do rectify, and that is what we are doing.
Last year, when the Honourable Prime Minister introduced the partial exemption system, he also said that this was to meet whatever criticism the European Union had. So may I know from the Honourable Prime Minister, now that we're changing the law yet again, is there any written document, any confirmation from the European Union that what we are proposing now is acceptable to them?
Well, obviously, there is no written communication from the EU. But, Madam Speaker, we have this technical working group, I have met with the EU. We have discussed, we have set this technical working group. They have been engaging fully with the EU. I am informed that we have come to a satisfactory conclusion. That is why we are moving. Again, I will say that we will debate it in the House, the Finance Bill. You will see that we have included certain amendments. We have, I must say, I have been informed that those amendments are considered to be satisfactory to the EU. So this is where we are now. So at the end of the day, we'll see whether the EU will remove us from the grey list and put us on the white list. But let me say, the Honourable Member knows perfectly well that the EU's system is somewhat different from the OECD, in that they will keep on assessing all countries every year. So by next year, we don't know exactly what other standards they will be proclaiming. And I must say, this is a bit unfortunate, and I say this in all honesty, that it is unfortunate, because the honourable members especially will know that the industry is very wary of how things can change again in the future, because we need certainty, especially in a sector where we want to attract more and more people to do business here. And then the other issue that has to be highlighted, the fact that the EU will come up with their list. We all, I think Honourable Member knows very well that the countries also now, they are also coming with their own list. I don't know which is which, and which list will really prevail, because the understanding was that the EU will come with a list so that the members will not have to come up with their own list as it was done before. But we have seen Holland, they have now publicized their list. They have blacklisted a number of countries. And I'm informed that other countries also are coming up with their own list. So this is where we are.
B583.
Madam Speaker, I am informed by the Commissioner of Police that an inquiry has been instituted by the Central CID into an alleged case of massive financial fraud involving several billions of rupees perpetrated to the prejudice of the policyholders and clients of the former BAI company, Mauritius Limited. Madam Speaker, regarding Part A of the question, I am informed by the Commissioner of Police that 14 persons were arrested during the course of an inquiry and were released on bail. With regards to parts B and C of the question, the DPP advised no further action against the 14 persons.
The Honourable Minister Mento mentioned that the DPP advised no further action from the people who has been arrested. So may I take it from the Right Honourable Mentor that in fact there wasn't any Ponzi or Ponzi-like scheme?
Well, the police inquired, and when the inquiry was over, the file was submitted to the DPP, and after considering, the DPP found that no further action should be taken.
Out of the 14 persons which has been arrested, is the Honourable Right Minister Mentor aware if there are any employees of the Financial Services Commission being given that all these products were licensed by the Financial Services Commission?
No, I don't have the names.
B585.
Madam Speaker, the required information is being compiled and will be tabled in due course.
Has the Honourable Minister taken cognizance of the report of the Commission of Inquiry on drug trafficking, which was extremely critical about the lack of effective, and I quote, effective inspection of retail pharmacies, the more so that there is no special unit to carry out that function? Has the Honourable Minister taken cognizance of the comments of the Commission of Inquiry?
Yes, Madam Speaker, since then we have set up a unit to look after, to investigate the retail pharmacy.
Has also consideration been given to the recommendation made by the Commission of Inquiry that an independent inspectorate be set up?
To be fair, we have not set up an independent inspectorate, but we have had a team of senior pharmacists to go around Ireland to investigate and to check on this pharmacy.
I hear what the Honourable Minister has mentioned about the creation of this special unit, enforcement unit. You know, from the Honourable Minister, how many new inspectors has been recruited to carry out the inspection?
They are mainly senior pharmacists. We have taken quite a number of pharmacists last year in the budget. It was in the budget last year, I can't remember exactly, but quite a fairly large team has been set up to go around the island, especially to those pharmacies that we suspect are doing this kind of job. We are going to inspect these pharmacies. So the work is being done.